Please, everybody, a warm welcome. Gentle Giants. Gentle Giants is our topic today. So we will touch upon male bodies, masculinity, perception of the hero. Watching the two films, one after another, I don't know, the first thing that, touched me was the question of vulnerability. I thought, like, if we see the main protagonists, Ultraman and Serrão, as heroes, their bodies are so radically different. I don't know, Savina, I'm looking at you a little bit, even so you're not sitting next to me. I don't know, this, like, we have one body that is deeply scarred, heavily moving, and we have the super sleek, metallic body. But obviously, we are talking about two very different kinds of filmmaking. But if you put them into relation, what triggers you? I would be curious.
I was thinking.
This works.
Okay, thank you. It's a group effort. I was thinking about the role of aggression and how the bodies encounter or engender or both in relationship to violence. And of course the first one that we see, Ultraman's body, I was very, 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 it was very hard for me not to trace all the patterns on the metallic body, the colors, the sleekness, as you said, and also the very particular shine of it, and just the I'll use this, thank you, the beautiful shine of the body. And the male body, we don't often get to see it that way. Even if it's a robotic body, it's still. I also want to know if you think the body is gendered. Maybe we can take it from there, right? Because there's something very specific about the robotic body, because we're taken into questions of post-humanism from the get-go, right? And post-humans are supposedly genderless, right?
Let's do the most important thing first. What do you want to drink? Because I realize it's a little bit awkward if I sneak around now. Let's maybe I open some bottles. We have some whiskey.
Thank you.
Whatever you prefer. Do you want some whiskey over
Do you
there?
want me to pass it?
No, thank you. No, thank you. Yes. No, thank you. Okay. Then, sparkling or non-sparkling is the only question I can ask.
Let's go with bubbles.
Okay, let's go with bubbles.
Nice.
I don't know, it's always a pleasure and a pain if your questions are being stolen. But yes, the question of the gendered body. Now I'm kind of looking at you, Daniel. Ultraman, the title. Did you read it as male? Because I think I haven't really. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I didn't watch the movie before this screening, so I was thinking, it's the ultimate man, like the Superman or whatever. But ultra, I'm not so sure, but I feel it means something more like beyond. So it's like beyond male, and what struck me is then to hear it's also really like a trans-species being that's like an alien, like a hybrid between alien and a human body, and that's what gives it this superpower. So from the beginning I felt like, okay, this character, this male character, is actually liberated in the moment where he like transforms into this being. And the other thing that was like maybe my favorite part of the movie is that in the beginning, when they were fighting Ultraman against these monsters, that his superpower was actually to receive, like to really suck in the thing that's coming towards his chest or their chest into the heart, and to just see that this is the superpower that makes him succeed. You know what I mean? Like it's a penetrable body.
To take the attack.
Huh?
To take and to sustain the attack.
Yeah. To be like,
and wait until the moment when the kaiju cannot give anymore or takes a break.
Yeah, which is not really supposedly a male quality, right? We would associate that quality of taking in and being penetrated with the womanness rather than the maleness. And then when we think of vulnerability, then it becomes genderless, obviously, because it's a quality that genders share and goes beyond.
also like Ultraman is a space entity, so it only became kind of with a gender when it melts with a man that died protecting a child.
Let's quickly take half a step back at this fights of Ultraman, the postman against the monsters. Daniel, receiving and taking in is one thing. The other thing is that he makes, these weird spinning moves. You as a performance artist, like the performativity of this superhero, because you pointed to this very passive stance, but also these movements. Is it, I don't know if you're into superhero movies, but just from a performative perspective, what did you think about this? The way he fights?
It felt like this suspended classic, almost like trashy cliche kind of superhero poses that were more like camp, quoted in a camp way, and then he does these things that are totally nonsensical. Like it's a bit like a ballet or something, like a very hyper stylized body that is also again strong because of showing qualities that are not virile or inherently violent. They are more very elegant, and I guess this is another thing where I feel that this male form of the human character is transcended, definitely.
So, Kristina, you wanted to say something?
Well, martial arts can be very elegant.
Exactly, yeah. I guess it's also like a cultural perspective, like from a Western, Middle European perspective. It's it has something in a refined way that I was not growing up with as like the male figures that I was exposed to.
So, when Ultraman is receiving this destructive force, one of the female characters, I think, says he's protecting us. And there we have it again, I guess, a figure that I'm accustomed to, the male protector. Savina, because you also brought this genderlessness, do you think this is the wrong reading? Or does something resurface that there is a guy who is like strong enough to take it all in and to shield the nuclear power plant or whatever it was protecting in that moment?
Yeah, maybe the question is whether it benefits us to think that this is the correct reading, because it benefited them back then and it helped them push through and not completely give up on everything, because they were quite close to doing so. But we've seen that in history, especially Western history, that these ideas of the impenetrable, invincible man, protector, have generated a lot of narratives in, I don't know, war films, let's say, that are just a war film has won the BAFTA. I'm just like say, it's quite something the way it's transformed this idea of the protector and hijacked and put into extreme tropes. And this film obviously does not do any of that. It stays within a very safe realm, but it does bring up the question of sacrifice, which is also a virtue that is strongly associated with a warrior, man, hero, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's something that the movie does a lot, right? Ultraman sacrifices his extraterrestrial, whatever, eternal life to be human. Kristina, is that something that you recognize? And since I apologize, but addressing for somebody who has done quite a lot of programming for East Asian movies, is that something? Does Ultraman stick out in this treatment of masculinity or like genderlessness, or is it maybe it comes across here for us as something that we, being accustomed to Marvel universe, is a little bit at odds. But if I think of like the Mecha universes, also Neon Genesis Evangelion, which the director is, the creative force, it's often very androgynous and slender. So maybe you can take us with you a little bit. How would you position that film in your viewing history?
Well, it's a
large question, but you're free to make it short or long.
I actually have never been thinking about either Asian superheroes or man or extraterrestrial being, and also talking about the mecha as something genderless, but perhaps kind of like gender uniting in a way, or something that actually covers the genders. When you started with mecha, you can have anybody inside, because it's something like a suit, it's a costume that gives extra power to anyone who can ride them. And with Ultraman, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's actually extraterrestrial being. And if you look even to films or stories without anything supernatural, when you go back to, well, it can be a subgenre of war movie or fight movies, the martial art films, they never really had problems about having a man warrior or a woman warrior. This was never an issue. It can be also because of the idea of genders not being against each other in a way, but being really complementing each other. Which, when you look into the reality of the Asian countries and the structure of society in the real life, it's quite strange image that is projected in the stories.
What do you mean by that? It's at odds
because
with
if you look,
patriarchal society?
Yes, exactly. They're now quite strongly patriarchal from the political point of view in the governmental system, but also reflected in the family, the company structures.
If I remember correctly, in Japan some years ago there was something like a protest movement akin to Me Too, addressing this like pretty hardcore also underrepresentation of women in positions of power, but overall like a patriarchal system that is deeply like pushing women in submissive positions. I'm struggling to, because I also see this film as being kind of post gender. Is it a projection? Is it the utopia? Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, I hope it is not utopia, but kind of like side stream that is still that is alive and rather active also in Japanese society. You can basically, it's okay coming then to documentaries. There has been, I think, premiered in September, documentary 100 Years and Hope. Which 100
Years and Hope?
Yes, okay. Which is dedicated to basically Japanese Communist Party, but not only because it's a communist party, but because of what it represents. It's like people with ideas of fighting for human rights in sense of student rights, LGBTQ rights, women rights, opposing the governmental party, which is referred to as a party of all sense, like alt-white, like not white in Japan, but equivalent of old white dudes keeping in the power and basically using fear and this kind of fear from change. Because this is now we have a stable system which can work also in Japan, because Japan is still an island and going back in history and keeping like self-protection. I think it's also reflected in the film, the stance towards the international politics and how Japan has to have the upper hand and to be the first in contact with first Ultraman and then all the aliens arriving in, and then to just be the first there, especially contra Americans.
Yeah, that was kind of cheeky in the film when they say, for some reason kaiju only appear in Japan. We don't know why. It's like this. I want to get into one detail that is kind of stuck in my mind, and I'm just gonna look at you two. This female character in Shin Ultraman, she sometimes slaps her own ass. In like the last scene when he's about to fly off, she slaps his ass. Did you? What do you make of this? Did you also have like it's bothering me? I cannot point my finger, but I thought maybe you have some interesting ideas about.
She mentioned also something like get in good spirit or something.
Yeah.
Like it's, I guess, yeah, it's very. I can relate to that.
You can relate to that.
At least.
I thought I'd slap you.
For me, it was like kind of a moment of owning the move that basically it's women who get slapped like at a secretary by some superior, like go get it.
Yeah,
Get me the coffee.
And also to just introduce something very embodied into this totally disembodied computer, people sitting in front of computers, being in meetings, offices, which is, all around the globe, not only in Japan, a very disembodied world. And I just like also the sensuality with which she also put her high heels on, just this really enjoyment of like, you know, and then also this huge version of her also wearing these high heels. It had something really like, here's a body. Like,
yeah, that's a very good point, because I was thinking about how I yearn for something more sensual in the film because of the way it was shot, because of the, all the special effects. They take us away from the body, obviously, but also I couldn't really get over how amazing some counter shot compositions were. You know, seeing the camera from the inside of a crisps bag or something like that, or from between her legs. These kinds of moments when you realize the camera is a completely separate entity, is embedded in everything else but the body, and it doesn't really utilize close-ups. These kinds of things are not that emphasized, so we don't really get to be that close to bodies unless it's huge Ultraman's body. We see every small crease wherever it is. That's the only body we're granted attention to, plus the examples that Daniel gave. I really, really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you often have these shots from the computer's perspective, straight in the face, which are like medium close-ups. So they are not really. They are these like grew accustomed to them. These zoom window distances, which are not really close, not close enough for some reason. But I agree with you. When I saw then Serrão, the second film, it was like I was breathing like a breath of relief to be closer to grit, to dirt, to the world in general. So Ultraman was also a film that was a little bit sterile, but artistically so, articulately so. But I would like to, maybe ask you a little bit more into this direction. It was a film full of very sleek surfaces. Was it just these small moments of irritation, the high heels, the slapping on your own ass, or is it also a little bit a bloodless, sexless film? I don't know how to. What's your feeling?
Yeah, maybe this as well. But that said, I'm happy that it didn't follow through any kind of tropes about romantic heterosexual engagement. This was nice to not see it, even if there were hints of it. It didn't follow through. But yeah, definitely the sleekness is something that takes away the pleasure of your eye grating at a surface. This pleasure that we get from watching film on analog, bad quality, or disintegrating. These things that phenomenologist Laura Marx writes about, the eye as camera, the camera as an eye, that we can literally touch the screen because it is so scarred already. And Ultraman had none of that. Obviously, other things stood out for us, and it's quite interesting to think about that particular robotic, non-robotic body. We can talk about this as well. What kind of body it is? Is it a suit? Is it whatever? Yeah, but it really took me out.
Special effects-wise, I really appreciate that, because before, like 2 days ago, I started watching some YouTube clips of the Ultraman series back in the 60s. And it was guys in costumes, and I think it's meant to be metal, but the costumes were fabric, so the metal was creasing, and they kind of took this into the film, this kind of a little bit, I don't know, soft metal, if that makes any sense. I think they kind of paid reference to that. It's something that I would maybe like to go back to at a later moment, this kind of retro vibe that the film has. But now I'm kind of, okay, let's talk for a moment about cyborg, post-humanism, bodies that are, very sleek and slender. As a performance artist, your body and bodies is the material with which you work. What do you take out of the vision like this, where bodies, even when he's the Ultraman again, is injured, like terminally ill? There is no. Once the guy, the human form, is lying in a hospital bed, and I think there are some bandages or so, but there is no blood. There is no spit, no saliva, no nothing. What kind of a body is that? Something? Is it a post-human body? Is it even something that is desirable?
I would like to make a distinction between transhumanism and posthumanism.
Yes.
As to like also how, like Bradotti, for example, she like frames this idea of posthumanism as something that where we decenter the human.
Can you say the name again, quick?
Bradotti. She's many years ago, I guess, she wrote this book, Posthuman, and it for me it still stuck that there's a distinction in trying to transcend the human using technology and becoming a cyborg, or to like decenter the human from the story that you tell about the world. And so I feel like thinking of posthumanism, I look more at the wound in the lost eye here in the second film. I feel like, okay, there's a human that's broken open, and there's like potential for crazy things that could come out of this perspective of like really again being penetrated by the world. And then what I find interesting in the Ultraman movie is that there are aliens who come from an advanced civilization to actually help us at first to deal with the effects of our own destructive behavior, because these kaijus are like, as I get, revenge forces of nature. So this is, I find really interesting how, like, what, still the question, what is it? Yeah,
that's the post effect of atomic misbehavior, and that's also interesting in terms of what you mentioned, the white superheroes. Usually the danger also comes from outer space, either with them or somehow it's not naturally born as or mutated on this planet. So Earth becomes only kind of like a battlefield. And with Ultraman and also with Gojira, you have basically the monsters being result of human activities. There is still a bit of question of like the really subsea kaijus that you have.
There's experts debate.
Then we can go also to the mythologies, because then we can find equivalents there.
But you know,
and it's also like
I would like to kind of poke you there and saying something critical about the film. You know, once in the film they say something. Okay, I'm looking at Ukraine, the war in Ukraine at the moment, and there is a sentence like, when people talk to each other and make peace, it's always the best option. You know, like, and it sounds incredibly naive. You know, like the way humanity is treated in that film, you know, it's like, oh, the fragile humanity that is worth saving. At someone I was like yawning and thinking, okay, what? It's a very, very shallow message. Am I being too critical there? Because I guess I would like to be in this position to take it politically serious. Maybe you can help me. I was this time I was around. I was more like, I don't know. I don't buy into this.
Here we can perhaps return back to the camp, and also on what you see, the bodies on the outside is kind of like mirrory, and the whole film is actually staying on in a way surface level of solutions, and it's supposed to be
very openly so, right?
Yeah, and there's a little bug in my head telling me, because previously the director and writer, they did Shin Gojira, and there they have been like told off that they went too deeply into ecological debates and it was really boring, and they wanted to go perhaps for something deeper, and it was all meetings and talks. And here you don't have everything that is political or touches it, just like really 1-2 sentences, and you can make anything out of it. And it stays on this point of naivety.
I think I would second that and give a little recommendation that Shin Godzilla, so like the predecessor of the same duo, is a very interesting, I don't know, satire on democracy. And very wild too.
It is, and
so
we can also return to it with your point about how the film looks and kind of costumes and effects.
Yeah. The thing is that we do not have a lot of time, and the evening is late, so I have to kind of pick the cherries. I would like to talk about emotions for a moment. Both films struck me positively as being about, in one way or another, engaging with like male heroism or the lack thereof. Without anger was not an emotion that I saw in any of those two films. And anger is something that I find very much associated with male power. Also in the Marvel universe, the screaming Thor who like resurrects, and like in Shin Ultraman, they were most of the time calmly talking it out. I don't know, I'm looking into your direction now. Is that something that you can second? This absence of anger was something that I found very, very soothing in both films.
I found it especially in the second one, because I felt it really genuine. Like also this beautiful scene where these two men were talking about fatherhood and having responsibilities and just having this very intimate moment of sharing the challenges of being a man and trying to be good in this without having the resources, and still trying to be dignified in a world that tells you certain things you need to do in order to be dignified as a man. So this really struck me. And in the second film, I found a lot of like undercurrents of violence. I
Which
mean,
one? Do you mean the?
Like you have all these suit and tie guys who are actually super violent and to like try to make decisions, but especially also these outer space guys. You didn't talk about them, which also I find a funny skeptical note on transhumanism, because they come from a very advanced civilization and they're still toxic as shit, and they want to rule the world and have the solutions. And the one is even shallow. He's just he's like Zardos. I found the name was also maybe a reference to Zardos. This like trashy film where this Karl Marx face is floating around, and it's just like, I found the film still violent because I found the anger was more suppressed, but
And it was kind of externalized from humans, because humans were the calm ones, like, okay, we have this casuals here, this ring, like, let's think, and then the extraterrestrials comes in and just like I'm gonna destroy you and I'm gonna rule the world and I'm gonna turn the people and nations one against the other.
What do you say?
Yeah, I
Subliminal anger.
So that actually speaks slightly against my first, that the danger comes from the earth, but
yeah, I mean, in the first film it was quite complicated for me to say, okay, this is where we stop, because there's more and more things that have to be overcome. So I'm thinking, whose anger, right? Ultraman, he has no anger. He's like this.
He's zen.
Super
chilled.
Yeah, he is absolutely on it in all sorts of ways. But then the other extraterrestrials, they are full of anger.
Are they?
I mean, they have some sort
mischief?
Unjustified revenge streak. I don't know.
Their motivation is a little bit muddled.
There is more negativity there. Let's put it that way. if we're gonna be more neutral about it, there is absence of anger. But this question made me think about the spectator. What are we put in? What role are we put in as a spectator in both those films, especially watching them back to back, because we are invited to ask ourselves this question: what are we allowed to feel? Because we're feeling many things. Some things come to the surface in the first film, others in the second film. However wholesome these situations can be in the Brazilian film that we see at the end, there's a lot of things that we expect to be expressed and then they're not. That makes us question our own predispositions. And then the bigger question is, what are we allowing ourselves to feel towards the gentle giants of the world.
Please answer the question now.
And there is also, like, especially in the Ultraman, this kind of like hidden, perhaps, fear, actually.
Yeah, because it seems like these men are allowing themselves to feel things that sometimes we as spectators in our daily life are not allowing our projections of men to feel.
Then I'm going to probably ask a last question to the round of us. Both movies have a very strong sense of hope. Ultraman is kind of sacrificing his extraterrestrial form in order to join the humans, and in Serrão it's about second chances, coming out of prison, making amends, hoping for a better life. Is there hope for the gentle giants? I'm asking that question like honestly. Masculinity, is it worth saving in the form we see in those films? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe you, Daniel.
I don't know about these films, but what I was thinking of when I saw them was again that the liberation of men and the liberation of the world from certain forms of masculinity lies in the acknowledgement that men, we as men, I say, are a subcategory of humans. That we are not anymore the reference point, but just one part of humanity. And as such, I feel like it's nice to have diversity and to know and to just like be like, I wrote this in the email I sent you. It's like, yeah, I want to see heroic stories about guys doing the dishes and not making a fuss about it, or emotionally available fathers, or, and there were glimpses of hope in the second film. And in the first film, I still feel like the penetrated male body is another beacon of hope. At least when my body is penetrated, I feel really, really good. And I know that I can let go of a lot of tensions of like monster, like android, how do you call it? Like these.
The monsters.
The fabric, yeah, you know what I mean.
Dreams.
And the monsters, the real monsters comes out. Like the kaiju in my body comes out, and that's really nice. So.
Yeah. And actually those are like kind of really sturdy bodies, the kaijus. No, and it's also like the masculinity itself, it's something we cannot touch it. It's something, it's a concept that we are making up. And we are keeping it alive, we can change it, we can do anything. So that might be perhaps also the transformative moment. And it's like how it works with the concept of femininity. And it's also like all the question of gender and genders. Is it just one, I don't know, sea of gender or sea of genders? And how it looks, how we shape it. And perhaps that's why it's really nice to have an alien with a reflective body, and we can see the humanity also a bit wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, adding on to this, definitely I think we live in a world that has been built up for so long to be hard, and hardness has been the most important quality of masculinity for so long that I would say softness is underrated. So if the gentle giants are bringing softness in the game, I would say, yeah, definitely there's hope.
And also like the hardness of being quality, like the respected quality in women. Like she's so tough, she can endure. Yeah, basically she's an Ultraman because she can endure, she can take in, and she can go on, she can protect.
That was nice. That was very sweet. At Critics Week, we sometimes had this thing that we pick a topic or a title, and it turns out that it doesn't really work, doesn't really stick, it's too abstract. But I have the feeling Gentle Giants hit the mark. So congratulations to the programming team.
Actually,
we are very
on the note
happy.
of hope, actually, the Ultraman it should be the first film in a trilogy planned. So
we can hope for
there
more.
There is a hope. There are new hope. That's different series, but.
So, only a few people stayed, which is okay. It's intimate. Does anyone have? Do we have a Saalmikrofon? How do you say an audience microphone? So, are there any questions and/or comments from anyone sitting here? Or should we take it to the foyer? Ah, there is one.
I'm standing, sorry, but I can sit. I was curious, how did you perceive this this aspect of Shin Ultraman, that basically the humanity is also treated like almost like cattle? I mean, these extraterrestrials are talking about the fact that they want to get rid of humanity because they are potential bioweapons. I find it so crazy, that metaphor. What did you think about that? Talking about posthumanism and all.
Well, there are plenty of other sci-fis taking this idea. It's a very, very B movie on Netflix, which is Beyond Skyline, which treats on this idea that humans are here just kind of like for brains for the extraterrestrial, but the extraterrestrials underestimated humanity that also evolved and can fight back. And luckily we have Frank Grillo and Iko Uwais, and I think it was Yayan Rohian who really fight back with all elbows and knees. And I think actually in the Shin Ultraman you have a little hint in like, oh, so it's a heart. I also think that actually...
I have to admit that this part I really did not understand. I had no fucking clue what kind of bioweapons human beings are supposed to be.
I think
so I was like,
no,
you
understand?
Like,
I think because he already set the precedent of being merged with a human body. It seemed like that was a big deal. His transgression of Ultraman's transgression was to merge with a human body. So therefore, maybe all human bodies could be
turn into and turn into these destructive giants.
But they need the beta machine or whatever it was called, the beta gun, the beta case, beta box thing. Yeah. I also like this more like human beings as cattle is something that, of course, the Matrix is something that pops up.
But is it internalized self-hate? This is what I always ask myself when these kinds of notions come in. Or is it a desire to expose this self-hate into something else? I really don't know.
Or return to basically that humans are the biggest threats to themselves.
Yeah, this whole introduction of the aliens and their plans like really caused a lot of sadness in me, because I was like, okay, this is now what's happening when extraterrestrial species come. They kind of look and behave like humans, and it's just the same stuff on a different level, as I said before, you know, like we open up to other civilizations, and where are the blobs, where are the sexy tentacles, where are the microbes, like and the ways they really transform us, like this was really like a mirror.
There's a certain lack of
labyrinth.
Imagination, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that made me sad. Like, okay, that's that.
Or it's perhaps this kind of like deeply rooted gods of Olympus.
Yeah, I mean, I already put my cards on the table. On this level of abstraction, talking about humanity is not really doing anything for me. You can say, like, yeah. Well, on a positive note, any more questions or comments from the nice people?
But there was no dog running really in the film, in Shin Ultraman.
No dog?
Also, you know, the scene that it's so classic.
Don't have any animals there.
No, but in the second movie,
yeah.
there was this cute white dog.
It gives more life into the streets.
No,
the animals make it more human.
Yeah, what I also found is that when there was this classic scene of like some scenes of the humans doing their human life before the asteroid hits, you know, this thing that happens so often. This was the most, was like the most sterile that you could think of, and think, okay, if that's humanity, then
it's weird
fuck them, you know.
The things they picked, this like bending metal, is like one of the essential activities. I thought it was more interesting.
Quite cool.
And cutting hair. I think it was a hairdresser.
Children,
yeah,
people
and
looking
metal
at their
bending.
phones. But this also felt like a change of tack.
Yeah.
Even if it still was there, it does feel like there was making some difference.
I guess let's call it a night. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts. Thanks to Critics Week.